Hi, my name is Becky. I live in the Twin Cities. I'm in a suburb just north of the Twin Cities, about 15 to 20 minutes in Minnesota. And I'm making this video on February 18th. Um, and I'm making it just simply for the purposes of putting information out there of my own personal experience um, with different things during Metro Surge. That was when ICE agents were deployed to Minneapolis area, and you have to choose what you do with this information. But I think it's really important that different people kind of share their stories. And so what I'm going to share today is just for those of you who know me. Um, Hopefully, you can trust this information. I'm not like a content maker, as you'll be able to tell from the non charismatic way this video is already going. Um, but uh, yeah, so anyway, so information you can trust. So these are like stories from friends of mine, people I know closely. So first of all, I wanted to just share about a good friend that I work with. She is part of a bilingual church, Spanish and English bilingual church that meets not far from where we live here. So not actually in the city, but in one of the suburbs here. And they have a small church. They've had 6 people who were detained by ICE just from their church. 5 of those folks were asylum seekers, and 1 has refugee status. All of the people that were detained had paperwork that was showing that they were here legally, whether it was work document or, like I said, refugee, asylum. They were asylum seekers and they were already in that process. So they were meeting, regularly with like court check-ins, immigration check-ins. So one of the men that was held in detention was held just north of the Twin Cities, and he was held for 3 or 4 weeks. So he had at least 2 court hearings that were supposed to come up, and they were both delayed. And then eventually he was released, and I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 weeks, but long enough to make a pretty big impact on his life. And so he was finally released and just allowed to go back to what he was doing before. Of course, that he doesn't get to make up those wages that he missed while he was detained. And he also, unfortunately, missed the birth of one of his grandchildren while he was detained. Another member of her church was at home when someone in plain clothes knocked on the door and said that they had hit a car out on the curb, like hit their car that was parked outside. And so he and his wife went outside, and when they went out there, then from behind their home, another 3 men came out, and it turns out these were ICE agents, and they arrested him and detained him. The wife was saying, no, he's a refugee, let me get his paperwork. So she got the paperwork. My understanding is that they took it, but they didn't look at it or didn't care enough. That didn't keep him safe, basically. And so he actually was flown almost immediately to El Paso, Texas. And the ministry he had come through to be a refugee was in the process then of doing a habeas corpus. I don't know the legal stuff, but basically the lawyers were working on his behalf to say, no, he is here legally and he is a refugee. He has refugee status. And he was one of over 100 refugees from that ministry that were detained. And refugees are not supposed to be at risk of being detained by ICE. So he was eventually flown to a different city in Texas, and wound up in Houston, where they vetted him again, I guess, more so than, or I guess in addition to what he had been vetted when he first came here, and was it was fine, and he was released onto the streets of Houston. He did not have his ID. He did not have his paperwork that he went there with, and he had no shoes. His pastors up here, luckily, he had the support system of a church. So his pastors were flew down on their own dime and picked him up, and another gentleman who had was being detained, or had been detained and been released onto the street in Houston, and they drove him back up to Minnesota. So of course he had a lot of I can't remember how long. He was there at least a couple weeks. I want to say maybe 3. I don't quote me on that. All right, another woman from their church went to her regularly scheduled immigration check-in, and she checked in, all was well. She went out the door, and she was detained by ICE. I believe she was also flown to Texas, and I don't know what ended up happening after that. This friend of mine at this church is a notary public, so she has spent countless hours going to the homes of her church members, brothers and sisters, and 2 others signing DOPA and power of attorney papers. So DOPA is a form that is called Delegation of Parental Authority. And basically it's what families have been signing to say that another family can take temporary authority, parental authority for their children. In this certain situation, many of these families, or most of these families, are not comfortable having this person, this DOPA, delegation of parental authority form, be signed with someone in their own family, because people with brown skin are being targeted, or have been targeted throughout all of this. So many of these people, according to my friend, were signing these papers with white families, possibly from the church or possibly other places, that would give them parental authority to take the kids in if the parents were detained. The power of attorney papers are kind of a similar thing, but it's for having access to all your personal information and bank accounts and that type of thing. So if a mom and dad were, well, it wouldn't even have to be mom and dad, or if a husband and wife were detained, if whether or not they had kids, someone that was here would have they were signing the power of attorney for that person to have access to their bank accounts. So you can imagine, again, they didn't want to do this within their families. So many of these people that they were assigning for the power of attorney were like someone outside their family, someone who was not at risk, mainly due to skin color, of being detained. And so it's kind of like if I were to have my neighbor give them power of attorney, it's kind of an invasion of privacy. It's all of a sudden you have access to all this private information, and not that you don't care about your neighbor, trust them, but it would be kind of a weird thing for that to be the person that would have access, a non-family member. As of February 8th, she had signed 43 DOPA and power of attorney papers, like 43 for 43 different families. Another friend of mine, I don't have the stories for the other, was it 3 or 4 members of her church. I'm not exactly sure what happened with them after their detention. So I believe one was deported, but I don't know about the rest. So another friend of mine who is part of a church that is made up of people who were from a country who had their temporary protective status threatened. They had 12 families from their church, and this is a different group of people from a different country, not Spanish speaking. And these families have their paperwork just like the families from the other church. that I was speaking about. So they're either asylum seekers or refugees that have their paperwork. And the one who was detained also had his paperwork showing that he was here legally. But these 12 families really didn't feel safe to leave their homes. They had one of their members detained from this church as well. And the church now, again, it's a small community church. They are trying to raise money to get his car back because it was just left on the street. And then I guess I would imagine impounded, something towed somewhere. And so it didn't have a key with it. Uh, and so many of you know, if you have a key fob, that is like several $100s to get that replaced. And I can't say for sure if it had a key fob, but most cars do these days. So they're raising rent for that, or I'm sorry, they're raising money for that. They also have families who are struggling to uh, make their rent because there are only one of the parents is going out to work, and the children are at home now doing online learning, which of course I used to work in the schools, so I know it's a huge disruption to your learning. So those are the main stories that I wanted to share. And I know that we're kind of at the end, according to Department of Homeland Security, which I don't personally necessarily trust that everything that they're saying is accurate, just because it was supposed to be just really that this was all targeting criminals. But from these stories alone, you can see that wasn't the case. So I'm really hoping that it is winding down here in the Twin Cities. But there's going to be a lot of recovery that has to happen. There's a lot of people who are coming back now and having a hard time, of course, trusting the government, trusting the law enforcement. And then on top of it, just financial stresses happening, kids that are behind in school, just a lot of things that are coming out of this. And so even if ICE does leave, as they're saying that this is going to happen, or at least a big portion of them, there's still a lot of healing that's going to have to happen here in the Twin Cities. So just wanted to share that information with you. If you have your own stories of ICE, either personal or ones that are close enough in proximity to you that you feel you can speak on them, like I did on these today, I just encourage you to make a quick video. It takes less than 15 minutes, and hopefully this information can get out there, just so other cities too can be ready. And if they happen to, if they deploy people in mass numbers like they did here. So, all right, thanks for listening.